Picture this, it's 1974. Two brilliant minds, Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, are about to shake up the world of psychology and economics. They're not staging a dramatic coup, but they are unveiling a quiet revolution. They are about to expose the quirks and flaws, not of governments or institutions, but of something far more personal. Your mind. And my mind. And indeed, the minds of every single person listening to this right now. They conducted a series of seemingly simple experiments. One involved a spinning wheel, much like something you might see on a game show. This wheel, however, was rigged. It was designed to stop only on either 10 or 65. Participants would spin the wheel and then be asked a completely unrelated question. What percentage of African nations are members of the United Nations? Now, logically, the number on the wheel should have absolutely zero impact on their answer. It's random, it's meaningless. But that's not what happened. People who landed on 10 guessed on average around 25%. Those who spun a 65, their average guess shot up to 45%. This, my friend, is the anchoring effect in action. A seemingly irrelevant number, a random spin, subtly but powerfully influenced their judgment. And this wasn't just a fluke. Tversky and Kahneman replicated these kinds of results again and again, uncovering a whole host of these mental shortcuts, these heuristics, that our brains use to navigate the complexities of the world. These shortcuts, while often incredibly helpful, can also lead us astray. They can create systematic deviations from rationality, biases that skew our perceptions, cloud our judgments, and ultimately impact the decisions we make. Decisions both big and small. From what we choose to eat for breakfast, to the career paths we pursue, to the investments we make, our brains are constantly taking these shortcuts, often without us even realizing it. Now, the question isn't if we use these mental shortcuts, but when, how, and most importantly, how can we become aware of them? Because awareness is the first crucial step to mitigating their potentially negative influence. So are you ready to explore these fascinating quirks of the human mind? Because that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to examine these biases, not as abstract academic concepts, but as real everyday forces that shape our lives. And we'll explore practical, actionable strategies to navigate them, to make better, more informed decisions, and ultimately, to live more fulfilling lives. Let's start by clarifying something. These mental shortcuts, these heuristics, aren't inherently bad. In fact, they're essential for our survival. Imagine having to consciously analyze every single piece of information that comes your way, every single moment of every single day. You'd be overwhelmed. You'd be paralyzed. Heuristics allow us to make quick, efficient decisions in a world that is constantly bombarding us with stimuli. They're the reason we can cross the street without meticulously calculating the speed and trajectory of every approaching car, or why we can instinctively flinch when something comes flying toward our face. The problem arises when these usually helpful shortcuts lead us to predictable, systematic errors in judgment. That's when they become cognitive biases, and these biases are surprisingly pervasive. They're not limited to specific situations or types of people. They're part of the human condition. We all fall prey to them to varying degrees. One of the most common and perhaps most insidious is confirmation bias. This is our tendency to seek out, interpret, favor, and recall information that confirms or supports our prior beliefs or values. Think about it. How often do you actively seek out information that challenges your deeply held convictions? Or do you tend to gravitate towards news sources, social media feeds, and even friends and family who reinforce what you already believe? It feels good to be right, doesn't it? Confirmation bias provides that comforting sense of validation, but it can also create echo chambers, where we only hear our own opinions reflected back at us, reinforcing our biases and limiting our perspectives. We become increasingly resistant to alternative viewpoints, even when presented with compelling evidence. This can lead to polarization, not just in politics and social issues, but even in our personal relationships. Imagine you're convinced that a particular investment is going to be a huge success. You've done some initial research, and you're feeling confident. Confirmation bias would lead you to primarily focus on articles, reports, and expert opinions that support your optimistic view. You might subconsciously downplay or ignore any negative information, even if it's crucial to making a well-rounded decision. This could lead to overconfidence and ultimately a significant financial loss. Another powerful bias is the availability heuristic. This is our tendency to overestimate the likelihood of events that are easily recalled, often because they are vivid, recent, or emotionally charged. Think about the aftermath of a major airplane crash. For weeks, the news is saturated with coverage, and images of the wreckage are seared into our minds. Suddenly, people become much more fearful of flying, even though statistically, air travel remains incredibly safe. The readily available dramatic image of the crash overrides the less accessible, but far more relevant statistical data. Similarly, consider how news coverage often focuses on rare but dramatic events like shark attacks or lottery wins. These events, because they are so memorable, can distort our perception of their actual probability. We might overestimate the risk of being attacked by a shark while swimming in the ocean, while simultaneously underestimating the much greater risk of, say, a car accident. Then there's the anchoring effect, the one we saw in action with the Tversky and Kahneman experiment. This bias highlights our tendency to rely too heavily or anchor on one piece of information when making decisions, even if that information is irrelevant. Beyond the spinning wheel example, think about how this plays out in negotiations. The first offer made often sets the anchor for the entire discussion. Even if that initial offer is completely unreasonable, it can subtly influence the subsequent counteroffers and the final agreement. A savvy salesperson might start with a high price, knowing that it will likely result in a higher final price than if they had started with a more moderate offer, or consider how this affects our perception of value. A store might display an item with a regular price of $100, but have it on sale for $75. The $100 price serves as an anchor, making the $75 price seem like a great deal, even if the item is actually worth far less. Another crucial bias to understand is loss aversion. This is the principle that the pain of losing something is psychologically about twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining something of equivalent value. We are, generally speaking, more motivated to avoid losses than to acquire gains. Think about it this way. Imagine you find a $20 bill on the street. That's great. You'll likely feel a surge of happiness. Now imagine you lose a $20 bill. That's going to sting a lot more, isn't it? Even though the monetary value is the same, the negative emotional impact of the loss is significantly greater. This bias can lead to some irrational decision-making. For example, people might hold on to losing investments for far too long, hoping to avoid the pain of realizing a loss, even when it would be more financially prudent to cut their losses and move on. Or they might be reluctant to take risks, even when the potential rewards outweigh the potential losses. The framing effect, closely related to loss aversion, demonstrates how the way information is presented or framed can significantly influence our choices. Consider a medical treatment described as having a 90% survival rate. Sounds pretty good, right? Now, imagine that same treatment is described as having a 10% mortality rate. Suddenly, it might seem a lot riskier. Even though the underlying statistics are identical, the way information is framed can tap into our emotional responses, leading us to make different choices even when the objective outcomes are the same. Marketers and politicians are masters of framing, often carefully crafting their messages to evoke specific emotions and influence our decisions. And then there's the overconfidence bias. This is our tendency to overestimate our own abilities, knowledge, and the accuracy of our predictions. We tend to think we're better drivers than we are, better investors than we are, and generally more competent than we are. This bias can lead to a variety of problems. It can make us take unnecessary risks, underestimate the challenges ahead, and fail to adequately prepare for potential setbacks. Overconfidence is often a major factor in project delays, budget overruns, and even business failures. These are just a few examples of the many cognitive biases that shape our thinking and decision-making. There's the bandwagon effect, our tendency to do or believe things because many other people do or believe the same. There's the halo effect, where our overall impression of a person influences how we feel and think about their character. There's the ostrich effect, where we avoid information that we perceive as unpleasant or threatening. The list goes on and on, so what can we do about it? Are we doomed to be forever at the mercy of these mental shortcuts? Absolutely not. While we can't eliminate biases entirely, we can certainly learn to mitigate their influence. The first and most crucial step is awareness. Simply knowing that these biases exist and understanding how they work is a powerful tool. It allows us to start recognizing them in our own thinking and in the behavior of others. Once we're aware of these biases, we can start to employ strategies to counteract them. One of the most effective is critical thinking. This involves actively questioning our own assumptions, beliefs, and conclusions. Are we jumping to conclusions based on limited information? Are we seeking out information that confirms our existing beliefs while ignoring evidence to the contrary? Are we being unduly influenced by the way information is presented? We need to cultivate a habit of intellectual humility, recognizing that we don't have all the answers and that our perspectives might be limited or flawed. This means being open to considering alternative viewpoints, even if they challenge our own. It means being willing to admit when we're wrong and to learn from our mistakes. Another helpful strategy is to seek out diverse sources of information. Don't rely solely on sources that reinforce your existing beliefs. Actively seek out different perspectives, read articles from a variety of publications, and engage in conversations with people who hold different viewpoints. This can help you break out of your echo chamber and get a more well-rounded understanding of complex issues. When making important decisions, it can be helpful to use decision-making tools such as a simple pros and cons list or a more sophisticated decision matrix. These tools can help you to systematically evaluate the available options, considering both the potential benefits and the potential risks. They can also help you to identify any biases that might be influencing your judgment. It's also important to avoid making impulsive decisions, especially when you're feeling strong emotions. Emotions can cloud our judgment and make us more susceptible to biases. If possible, take some time to deliberate, to weigh the evidence, and to consider the potential consequences of your actions before making a decision. Seeking feedback from others can also be incredibly valuable. Ask trusted friends, family members, or colleagues for their honest opinions about your decisions. They might be able to spot biases that you've missed or offer alternative perspectives that you hadn't considered. There are even training programs, sometimes called debiasing programs, that are specifically designed to help people reduce the influence of cognitive biases. These programs often involve exercises and simulations that challenge participants to identify and overcome their biases in a variety of situations. And finally, there's the concept of nudges, which involves designing environments and choices in a way that subtly encourages people to make better decisions. This is often used in areas like public health and personal finance. For example, automatically enrolling employees in a retirement savings plan with the option to opt out is a nudge that leverages inertia to encourage saving. Placing healthier food options at eye level in a cafeteria is a nudge that encourages healthier eating habits. The journey to mitigate biases is a continuous one. It's not about achieving perfect rationality, because that's simply not possible. It's about becoming more aware of our cognitive limitations and developing strategies to compensate for them. It's about striving to make better, more informed decisions, both for ourselves and for the world around us. It is a lifelong practice of self-reflection, critical thinking, and a willingness to challenge our own assumptions. It's about embracing intellectual humility, recognizing that we are all susceptible to biases, and that the pursuit of better decision-making is an ongoing process. Ultimately, understanding these mental shortcuts and the biases they can create is about empowering yourself. It's about taking control of your own thinking, making more conscious choices, and shaping your life in a way that aligns with your values and goals. It's not about eliminating the shortcuts, but about learning to navigate them with awareness and intention. And that in itself is a powerful step towards a more rational and a more fulfilling future. Remember the spinning wheel. Remember the seemingly insignificant numbers that swayed opinions. And remember that your mind, while amazing, is also full of these hidden pathways. The key is to illuminate those pathways, to understand them, and to choose consciously which paths you want to follow.